And welcome everybody to the 187th episode of the Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series. It's a great day to be talking about this. We're just a couple weeks from the deer hunting opener and the weather is changing a little bit. We have even a chance of a little bit of snow in the forecast, I hear, possibly. So maybe get those deer moving a little bit. So joined today by Jeff Ledermann, our outreach section leader, and Kraig Kiger, our Northwoods guru. So guys, I'll let you guys take it away.
Thanks, Benji. It's really exciting to be here. Really great to be talking about a topic that I know is near and dear to our hearts, and hopefully a lot of you that are joining us have started getting interest in this sport, and we'll share with you probably a lot of introductory things, but hopefully some new things for some of you that have been doing it for a long time, and will help you maybe get a deer this year. So welcome. Really excited to be here with Kraig today. One of your guides, and so Kraig, I'll let you talk a little bit more, but Kraig has a lot of experience. Well, between the two of us, we calculated it up, almost 100 years of deer hunting experience. Crazy. Yep. That just means we're really old.
It does. So Kraig Kiger, shooting sports specialist for the Minnesota DNR. The Northwoods guru got tacked on a few years back, and I just let it ride. But I've been a lifetime resident of Grand Rapids. Been a deer hunter since I was probably 11 years old when I got to go out with my dad for the first time. I probably shot 75 deer, between Minnesota, Montana, Texas, kind of all over. But I've used firearms, I've used archery equipment. I started with a crossbow a couple years ago. But it's been a lot of fun, Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as Benji mentioned, we both work in DNR Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife Outreach section. I supervise the program, and again, also a lifelong deer hunter. It's really great to have you here, Kraig, with your experience and knowledge about the Northwoods. Mine started in southern Minnesota, and then most of the years in now west central Minnesota. So we'll talk a little bit about some of that perspective, how it's different between the two parts of the state, but not as many deer as Kraig, but I've really exclusively only been shotgun hunting. So, but over 20 deer, including quite a few in the last few years. I do want to say I'm not related to David Ledermann, although I will say that was probably one of my nicknames in high school. But in honor of David Ledermann, we do, and so Jeff Ledermann's top 10 tips today. We'll go through some of my things. Usually, if you know or familiar with David Ledermann, he always went in reverse order. But I want to start with number one, and that is to just get out there. There's no substitute for being outside and getting the experience and spending the time out there. The more time you're going to be out, the more you're going to learn, the more chance you're going to get a deer. 9 times out of 10, you sit out there, you may not see a thing, but if you're out there enough, you will.
Even if you make a mistake and you're out there, you're going to know next time not to do that, not to open up that noisy wrapper, not to get up and move around. You're going to learn something every time you go out.
Yeah, and another really great thing about being out there, and I think why a lot of us deer hunter, at least at this point in my hunting career, is just a good opportunity. We have a 9-day season where I think you have 16 days up where you hunt. It's just a lot of time. You can dedicate that to be out and just experience being in the woods. This picture here is one actually from last year. It was really one of my favorite moments of being outside and being in the woods, not hunting related, really just experiencing nature. Is this fog was just incredibly beautiful. And those trees back there is actually at one point I saw the fog just kind of roll over the trees like through a road and just kind of poured out of the woods into the valley. Is just so really cool. And there's some great experience. What's your favorite experience like being out in nature while you're hunting that you could, or I know you have lots, but what's one that you had?
Up north here we have Canadian jays or whiskey jacks, some people call them, camp robbers. And sometimes if you sit very still in your stand with a piece of bread between your fingers, you can get them to sit on your stand on the side rail and take that out of your fingers, or to have a chickadee land on the brim of your hat, and they'll bend over and look to see what's underneath there, and then they usually get scared and fly away. But you know, shooting a deer is great, but there's so many other things to pick up on out there.
Yeah, really fun. And last point here, keep learning. And I mean, we're still learning. Every year I still continue to learn something new. And some of these things I'm going to share today are what I just picked up in the last few years, actually. And to that point, if you're new to the sport, we have a great video series. Cassie, I know, is posting these in the links. We have a whole series of videos that we did a few years back called Learn to Hunt Deer. Great introduction and can really give you a lot of information if you're just new and want to learn more. So check those out. Number 2, take someone with you. Share that passion. You know, we have picked up a lot of these skills and knowledge over the years. If you've been hunting a while, it's a great opportunity to share that with others. I'll talk more about this with my daughters. I'm so fortunate to be able to have both of them that have joined me in the woods and actually been able to harvest a deer. And it's been, I mean, those are memories we'll have forever. They're going to have forever. And I've made a point, so here's the big tip, I guess, is to make sure you can make the time to record that. I actually created a journal with all our property that we call, and I'm very lucky to have some private property that my family has to be able to have that consistency. We've been hunting it 40 years. So go back and see all of that we've done, and even we can learn from that too. It's like, oh yeah, we kind of figured out when there's corn around, we see more deer, right? So there's things you can learn about some of these entries and what you've recorded, and it's just really fun. And of course we add the pictures and stuff, so it's a great way to continue to build and share those memories and keep them.
And just to clarify that, Jeff, you mean standing corn that they haven't harvested yet, not kernels on the ground.
Well, actually, even the harvested fields, Craig, you know, there's a lot of residue that after they've been combined, that the deer are still seeking out too. But
okay.
It's a deer magnet at this time of the year. That's for sure. Number 3, scouting. Again, kind of ties in with getting out there. In the last few years, we've discovered cameras, and there's some of them are amazing now, can send you pictures automatically immediately when the deer comes through. But, you know, before the days of cameras, it was hard to even know what kind of deer is potentially. You can see evidence like scrapes, like that middle picture, or deer beds, the one on the right. I think I took that last year. We had that little snow right before the season started and went out to check stands the day or two before. And sure enough, there was some deer laying down right next to one of my stands, which was really exciting and good to know. But having to build that picture, and actually some of these deer become, at least in the farmland part of the country, become really nocturnal, and it gives you hope to see. I mean, it can be frustrating because now I know there's some really nice deer around. Never seen them in person, but the cameras prove it actually kind of motivates you to get out there, right?
Mm-hmm. And the advances in trail cameras, we're gearing up for our 4th and final learn to deer hunt here at St. Croix State Park. And one of the guys has cell phone cameras out there that sends the pictures right to his cell phone, so he doesn't have to go to the park and download a card or anything. And the deer have been really moving this past week now.
Yeah, I think we're coming into the rut season, which comes to that next point. You want to talk a little about scent and scrapes and some of the, and we have I know we have a link that we'll put in there too.
Yep. You know, we have CWD in a few of the counties, and we can't use deer urine as an attractant or to make a scrape. But where you can, it's a powerful tool. I mean, you can go out and just take your boot and kick all the leaves and sticks and stuff out of a small circle and add some buck and rut lure to it, and it's a calling card where, you know, all the deer are going to go by and check that out. Even the does use the scrapes to tell the boys that, hey, we're ready to meet up with you. Mostly it's just the boys saying, hey, we're over here, you know, if you want to come check us out. But make sure you check your regs for your deer permit area before you go out and start adding deer scent to those scrapes that you've created.
Yeah, check out that link. And this is a really useful thing too. Again, the tip potentially here, or one of the tips, is if you have that near your stand or in a shooting range or near a shooting, a lane or axis where you can actually shoot from your stand, that will stop them, right? They will check it out. So, because a lot of times we see deer and they just keep trotting through or running through. Having a scent station or a scrape like this could get them to stop, both does and bucks. So it's a really helpful thing to do around your stand. And kind of, we're going in opposite order, but kind of I've been going through kind of like the steps and process, and we'll eventually get to like when you're harvesting your deer, et cetera. So we're kind of going in order in that respect. So one of the next things is to make a plan.
Yep. Figure out, where you're going to go, where other members of your camp are going to be. And the picture on the left with the tilled up food plot, that was done in the spring of the year and planted into just a menagerie of plants that deer like to eat. And it's all tilled up, it's disked in, and you can see the small box blind sitting on the wood line there. That's a way in northern Minnesota. I mean, otherwise the deer never walk by you, it seems. If you got a food plot where they get used to coming by and checking things out, I like to keep my deer healthy and happy, and then hopefully eventually get one to put in the freezer.
Yeah, so think about where you want to do this, and whether it's food plots or stands. Aerial photos are really helpful. That's the aerial photo of our property, and you can see some of the trails and some that have been made by us, others that the game make. Actually, you can see through the woods and stuff. Where is their food? Where are they bedding? Again, this ties out to getting out there and scouting. But once you've done a lot of that, find out a plan, and then of course for safety purposes, I always tell people when you're going out and where you're going to be too, especially in the North Woods where it's easier to get lost, right?
Oh, yeah, and what time you expect to be back?
Yeah.
Years ago, I was on search and rescue, and we always asked that question. Where did they go, and what time were you expecting them in? And if they're not in the last spot they said they were going to be, what I do now is I send my wife a text and say, I went from that north stand to our west stand, and she knows where they're at. So if I don't come back in a reasonable amount of time, she knows where to go and look. And we do text messages back and forth, and we'll talk a little bit more about use of electronics. But as long as I'm saying, hey, there's nothing going on here, I'm moving to a new spot, that's a perfectly legal use of electronic communication.
Just don't. Yeah, sorry, you were going to say that, but
yeah, you just can't say, hey, Jeff, make sure you're over on that east fence road because we just pushed a big buck down that road.
Yeah,
that would be highly illegal.
Right, can't communicate about deer or where they are or what they're doing. Right. So keep that in mind. But it's really important to let people know from a safety standpoint what you're doing, like especially if you have a large group of people hunting in the area or whatever. So
well, as you mentioned, we're both getting older, so it's important for people to know where we're going to be.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about setting up a stand, and or actually I really want to stress the point that you don't have to have a stand. You can sit on the ground. The first deer I ever shot, I was sitting on a bucket. I think the last deer I just shot last year was basically sitting on a bucket. So really, it's fun. I feel like you're more connected with nature, and you got to be on your game as far as like no movement and making sure you're aware of scent issues, but it's really possible. So you don't need much equipment at all to get started in this sport, including you don't need to have a big fancy tree stand or a blind or anything like that. But if you do go that route, there are some tips here for tree stands. Again, if you have private property, it's really easy to do this, but I've scavenged a lot of stuff. My neighbor took down a deck a few years back, and wow, that was perfect material for building a stand. So there's a lot of ways you can build stands with scraps. That's one of our stands, a picture of it. I got one new post I needed to get, but the rest was all stuff I kind of scavenged from things that were laying around and that we had leftover woods and stuff. One big tip I would say is to avoid trees. In fact, I have a video I just started here on the right that this is the cross post that holds up like the side of one of our stands, and you can see in that picture how it was moving. It's between 3 trees, and that friction and pressure and stress from the trees moving, those were huge nails that were in there, 8-inch spikes or whatever, and it didn't take more than a year, probably even less, to snap those things off. So it's not structurally part of that stand, because what I did instead then is to make sure that there are bottom posts that hold up the main frame of the structure. So do not rely on trees, because this is what's going to happen over time. So, or for sure, you need to make sure and test and everything study. But I highly recommend that you have a structure that's separate on post away, or don't even build in trees at all, to be honest with you. You got some tips on shooting lanes, I know.
So up here, we got a lot of thick woods and a lot of brush. I hunt on private land as well, and we've cut 6-foot wide shooting lanes, kind of a wagon wheel spoke, so that when you see a deer coming, you can pick up on the next shooting lane and be ready for a shot when the deer steps out into that lane. If you're hunting on public land, you got to be really careful. I mean, you can take out some small brush, but you can't take out merchantable trees. The forestry department would want to have a talk with you about that if you started cutting down just trees at random. And the last one here, Jeff, that comes right out of our firearm safety training that we teach the kids with. Climb no higher than you're willing to fall. And the older I get, the less I want to fall. And you know, back in the day when I started hunting, you remember stands being 6 foot high maximum?
The law was,
Yep. And then we went to 9 and 12 and 16. And now I don't think there's a height limit on anything. And you could go as high as you want to go. I don't bounce as well anymore.
Yeah, and you don't really need to be, right? Even just being elevated 6 feet sometimes changes the angle, and the deer don't really notice you. But that gets into another point that we'll be talking about in just a minute. But the next one is stay warm. Obviously, the warmer, the more comfortable you are, the longer you'll be able to stay out. For me, the one tip here is get some choppers, those mittens. I'll typically wear a lighter, thinner glove that I can actually still operate my firearm with safely, and put the choppers over the top. When a deer is approaching, or I know it might be likely that there's a deer coming, I'll take them off and then be ready. But I won't be cold until that moment, and I'll stay nice and cozy. One way to help also do that is to make sure you're dressed in layers, and the base layer in our cold firearm season is really critical. Poly or wool layer, something like that, and then being able to put in layers. And then the other piece that it works really well with the mittens is the hand and toe warmers. If you're one that your extremities get colder as we get older, it becomes a little more challenging. They are really helpful to be able to keep your hands and toes warmer longer. You want to talk about some of the carrying in and backpacking and all that?
You know, a couple of my stands were a good quarter of a mile in from the parking area on our property, and I just didn't want to get sweated up before I got to the stand. So I would actually go in my fleece long johns, walk to the stand, carrying my warm clothes in my backpack. And when I got out there, I'd quickly put on the warm clothes and go up in the stand, and my warm clothes were dry. You know, and if you're hunting on public land, though, you got to make sure you got adequate blaze orange on. You just can't go walking through the woods. I use a Duluth pack for my backpack because it carries all my good heavy gear in it. And you know, the hand warmers, toe warmers, I always bring a couple extras in my my fanny pack just in case. You know, the other ones burn out and I want to add some heat. Your chopper idea is awesome. I mean, you can put those big hand warmers right down in there. And so yeah, those are good suggestions, Jeff.
Thanks. And yeah, the vest piece fits right with what you were talking about, because you can take it off and still have be legal with your less clothing on. And then when you get to your stand, readjust and put it back over the top. So make sure it's big enough for one thing to be able to do that. But the picture there, that's one of my daughters, super cold day during one of the deer seasons. It was probably 15 degrees out with a nasty wind. And you can see how she's layered up. In fact, you know, I'm kind of cheap, to be honest with you. So, you know, saving some money, we get a nice camo outfit for duck hunting. And then we can use a vest to overlay over that and with a hat, and you're pretty good to go. And you can see she's actually wearing a fuchsia colored ski jacket. So using some of the materials we already have, right? She's got it. That's one of her ski turtle mask or whatever, and the jacket. And you don't need a lot of really expensive new camo or other kind of clothing. You can use what you have and just layer up, and with the vest and hat, you're in good shape. Last tip here is if you do get cold, and it means whether or not you're going to stay or leave, I suggest getting down if you have to and walk around and warm up a little bit. If you do that, obviously you want to be a little slower and do that slowly and quietly, because of those 7 deer I've shot in the last 3 years, 2 of them were at about 8:30 or 9 o'clock, got out of the stand very quietly, very softly. And as I was starting to walk around a little bit, here comes 2 young bucks running down the trail right at me. So you still can definitely harvest deer even if you're on the ground. Yeah.
You know, if you're hunting with your family and your party, someone gets down and walks, you know, in the direction of the next stand, and maybe that person would get down and go to the next stand, and you end up making a 1-person deer drive between your stands, and everybody gets warmed up and maybe gets a chance to see a deer.
Yeah, good point. Let's talk about ammo. That's next. I'll let you, that's your specialty.
Yeah. Practice as much as you can, so that you know where your gun's going to hit. That's our job as a deer hunter, is to make sure that we're ready to go. We recommend that, you know, you can use lead at the range and get your gun sighted in, and then transfer to non-toxic, just to be better for the environment, healthier for you. We don't need pieces of lead scattering about our deer. You know, you can make that choice. There are some areas where you absolutely have to use non-toxic, but
yeah, and Cassie put that in the link. I think the link to that information, so you can see exactly where you can't use them.
And AmmoSeek is one of the sites that's recommended on our DNR website. You can go out there and research for your caliber or gauge, and find a vendor that has the non-toxic stuff for you.
Thanks. I do want to touch a little bit about when to go out, basically is what I mean here on this tip. And we can debate this a little bit maybe, but in cold weather in particular, as we're starting to head into, and we have in our firearm season, there's a lot of debate about how soon do I need to be in my stand before I start, before the legal shooting hours, half hour before sunrise. I maintain if you are going to get in 2 hours early or an hour early, or even a half hour, well, probably a half hour you want to do, but longer than that, if that means you're going to get down an hour earlier, you're going to get out of your stand by 8:30, it's better to wait closer to shooting time. Because again, there's more time that you're actually out in the woods when you can shoot something. Now, you may have a nice stand like Craig does here, with all kinds of heat or options to stay warm. That's going to factor. But if not, that's my thought on it.
And I'm of the get out there early. Like Jeff said, we do have a nice heater in there, and you can get it so warm you're hunting in a light shirt really, which is kind of nice. I've hunted in stands like Jeff, and I still have a few where it's open to the elements. You know, you got a big window that's letting a lot of cold air in, and you're bundled up in there. But you know, the longer, I think, the quieter you are. I like to get in before the birds start to chirp in the morning and watch the woods come alive around me.
That's fun.
it's interesting to be out there before anything else is awake, and you might just catch that big buck slipping through the brush on an early morning walk, but don't let cold weather keep you from getting out there. We built this stand here, and that was before I finished the stairs. And my wife asked me the question. She said, "Why are you putting stairs on the deer stands?" I said, "Because we're going to get older someday, and climbing a set of stairs instead of climbing a ladder would make it so much easier to continue doing it." And so most of our stands
and
have
safer.
stairs built. Yep, and it's got handrails on it. If you were climbing into this stand up a ladder, you'd probably want to use a safety harness so that if you missed a rung on the ladder, you're not going to fall 12 feet to the ground.
And that ties to the other tip there too, that I think a lot of people either skimp on or don't think about, and that's a haul rope.
Yep. All of our stands now that we have ladders on, we have a haul line, so you can strap in your backpack, strap in your firearm. Once you get up and secured in the stand, you can pull the rope up to your stand, bring the rifle up, bring your pack up, and it's just too dangerous to go up a ladder, shifting weight on your back. I tell people all the time, I said, watch the ladies shopping in a store. They'll have their purse up on their shoulder and they'll be sorting through, and pretty soon that shoulder strap is down on their elbow, and that's the same thing that's going to happen to your rifle. It's just gravity's going to pull it down there, and if you got a long ladder to climb, that's not a very comfortable way to go. So use a haul line, and I attach a permanent one to all of my stands.
Yeah, I do too. Good tip. Okay, let's talk about when we're in the stand and we're waiting for that deer. I mean, scent is important, and I know there's a lot of stuff out there about that, and you can watch a lot of videos, but to me, especially with as dry as it's been around here lately, sound and hearing or listening is so important. It's like it's the number one thing that you will trigger. Usually, again, if it's too windy, it's going to be more of a challenge, but that, especially in the morning when it's usually calmer, or the evening, you're going to know a deer's coming. So I try to keep my ears exposed. I usually do in layers like you see in that picture there. If I need to pull up a hoodie or some head or neck gate or whatever, I will, but I try to keep at least so my ears are free so that I can hear that. Now, as we're getting older, it's harder, but that's my big tip here.
So I've been a shooting sports instructor for 20 years, 19 with the state, and I've lost 85% of the hearing in my left ear and about 75 in my right. So the tip is to protect your hearing while you're out there at the range, because I don't hear deer walking through the woods anymore.
Yeah.
I got to hunt with my eyes, and I know that's a slide that's coming up here in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, you get out, practice, make sure you're using ear protection for sure. Thank you. That's a really important tip. So yeah, the next one, I think, or even frankly more important, potentially you would say, is movement. If you're in a stand like you have, that we had a couple slides back, is not as important. But if you're sitting on a pail, for sure, or in some of the stands that I've been seeing, or one like this stand where from the waist up, you're pretty well exposed. It's so important not to move. In fact, I've gotten to some points when I've been out, and I'll just actually close my eyes to keep myself from moving and use my ears and just not move. And I've seen so many deer when I haven't moved for I'm talking like 15 minutes or a half hour, I don't move a muscle. And it allows you to hear everything and for the deer to not see you, because they really key in on that movement. So it's so critical. One of the tips I have is think about how some other predators are out in the wild and how they deal with when they're hunting, like an owl. They do have a field of vision that they need to see. So if you do have to look one side or the other, you probably are shooting out multiple areas, whatever. When you do that, move like an owl. Slowly twist your head, turn, and stop and stare and watch, and do that for a minute or two, however long you can, right?
Yep.
And then move again. But just minimizing that movement will bring or allow a lot more deer to come closer to you than you might have ever imagined.
stopping a walking deer, use a grunt call, use your voice to mimic the sound of a deer, just, and that's usually enough to make them stop. I got the privilege to set with my wife last year, and the deer come across the entire length of the field, and she's trying to move the rifle as the deer is moving, and it's like she's forgetting to stop it. So I just did a soft grunt like that, and the deer locked up in the middle of the field, and she shot it. I've seen hunters do a sharp whistle, you know, and the deer will stop momentarily long enough for you to get that shot off. But a stationary deer is going to be a much more high percentage of getting that deer than trying to shoot a walking deer.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about, well, I got to get my gun ready, or in my case, I got to get my choppers off. So can you move? Yeah, but make sure you time that with, like, if you're hunting in the woods, of course, when the deer is behind a tree or brush, it's not or it's not looking at you. I had a 10-minute confrontation when I was sitting on a pail last year with a buck at about 30 yards, and we just did a stare down. But eventually he turned his head, so I was able to move, get the gun up. He turned and went behind, or then eventually he was behind a tree. Then I was fully able to raise and get ready, bring my gun up, and then he took another step out. And so, yeah, you just watch for that, watch what the deer is doing, and take those opportunities when their head is behind. Of course, you want to be as quiet as possible, but you can move, and you will have to, obviously, and then you can get a shot when hopefully they're not expecting it and they're stopped. So good points. Again, okay, we have got more than 10, but there's a couple other items that I wanted to touch on. One is IDing your deer, a little bit tips. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but trying to find, and part of this is with the tagging and trying to, you know, the DNR, when you get a possession of a deer and a tag, put on a harvest tag, they do ask you, and you call in your registration of what kind of deer you harvested. So it's important to know this, and there's a lot, again, information on the internet about this probably, but the biggest difference between does and fawns is that does in general are much more rectangle shaped. That picture on the left with the doe and the 2 fawns, she's facing broadside, you can see very rectangle. Fawn, and then she has a very long nose. And so fawns have more of a square. They're not as long, and their noses are shorter. So those are kind of the quick things you can see in the field to ID. The picture on the right, you can kind of tell by looking, especially the noses, what a big difference there is between those two. The doe being the one next to my daughter and the fawn being next to me. So those are some quick tips on there. Any other quick things you want to add on that before we go to bucks?
You know, just make sure you got the right license, or you're in an area, a deer permit area that allows for harvesting antlerless deer. I was going to bring in my little skull today, and I forgot it this morning. I've got a buck that measures 2 7/8 inches that I shot with my bow, and so I took the time to do a European mount, and my wife said, "Why are you spending so much time on that little deer?" I said, "Because he's a great teaching tool. When I hold him up in a classroom with kids, and I said, 'What is it?' And they said, 'Well, it's a buck.' And I said, 'Technically, it's an antlerless male because the horns are less than 3 inches long.' So if you're looking for a legal buck, point number 1 there is 3 inches of horn or more. That's about the height of a dollar bill, and I haven't found a deer yet that would let me take a dollar bill out and measure that horn."
Yeah. So if you're in that situation, be careful. Make sure that you can see that it's longer than 3. Yeah, a couple of other points. We kind of, this calls other points, talk about that too. And that fawn bucks, again, even though they're a male deer, they're not a legal buck because they are a fawn. Typically, if they just have those little buttons, those are probably a fawn, and they'll have the shorter noses and that more square body. So yeah, good points. And again, we have a lot of that information on our website too, if you want to check that out. One of the things that people wanted to know too, I think sometimes, is how old the deer, and there's a way to look at their molars actually in their mouth. And again, I'll send you the internet to look that up, but you can tell the age of a deer, at least if it's older than 1.5 years, by what kind of molars it has. So that's one way. But in the field, again, looking at the antlers, you can typically tell, at least in our part of the country, what's a yearling, a yearling buck. We know fawns from what we're talking about earlier, but a yearling buck, that 1.5-year-old deer, will have this small little rack. Sometimes it's only spikes or 2 antlers versus, in this case, my daughter on the one on the left, she's got a 6 or even an 8 pointer potentially that was her first year. But it's small. It's like a little basket. It's within their frame of their ears. It's inside their ears. Now, I hope my girls aren't watching because I'm comparing one of them. They're very competitive. So the older one on the right, she's got a much older deer, right? You can see it kind of extends outside to the edges of the ears. I'm going to guess that one's like 3.5 years old, because every year from the yearling to the next, the size and the thickness and the spread of the antlers grows every year. That one's probably potentially could be 2.5, because the antlers go really fast in our region, but probably 3.5, maybe even 4.5-year-old deer. So you can get some estimate of their ages based on looking at their antler size.
Or just the body of the deer too. I mean,
that too, yeah.
You look for that Roman nose, like the picture on the right. The picture on the left has got more of a slender face, so he's a younger deer. And the belly, I mean, on a really mature buck, he'll have a dad bod, he'll have a belly on him, and he'll walk with a little bit more of a swagger.
Necks are swollen.
If the
more significantly.
Yep, and if you're looking for a good quality eating deer, that one on the left would be awesome. It'd be tender, flavorful. You get an older buck, and my wife actually told me one time, I came home with a really nice 8-pointer. She said, "Don't shoot those anymore." She said they're tough. You don't get to go to the grocery store and pick it out.
Well, we'll talk more about that. Let's go on to you got your deer. You want to talk about tagging and registering a little bit?
So in Minnesota, when you shoot your deer and you field dress it, you should be validating your tag with the date, the month, and the time, AM or PM, that you harvested that. If you're going to drag the deer out by any kind of mechanized, so 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, tractors, you got to attach that tag to the deer if you're going to use a mechanical transport device. If you're going to drag it out by hand, you don't have to. We tag a lot of deer through the ear. That's just a handy spot to put the tag. Sometimes we do go around the hind leg, but when you're dragging them out, that could get hooked on something and you rip your tag off. But that's a requirement to bring that deer back to your home and hang it up in your garage. And sometimes hunters forget to do that and they get in trouble.
And that information is so important to us as the DNR for wildlife management, and to be able to, understand the harvest, what the population is doing, how many deer are on the landscape, and help us determine how to manage them going forward. So it's also really critical data for us to be able to do that. So really important. I'm just quickly, a couple of tips. These are kind of related to some of the disease issues that we're seeing on the landscape. Making sure you have gloves and plenty of gloves and be able to clean up. Because of CWD in particular, we know it's more concentrated in bone and nerve tissues. So try not to cut the bones. You can reach up through the animal and hopefully cut the esophagus and the larynx or whatever, the windpipe, and be able to drag out the innards from the up. There's a great video, again, that Jamins and Kelsey put together a few years ago about how to gut a deer. So I know we have the link for that we've shared, but otherwise you can just search DNR how to cut a deer and you'll get to that video. Last thing here, I encourage you to keep the heart. I think that's something people overlook. It's a great muscle, tastes good, and can really be integrated into your venison. So speaking of that, last tip, butchering, some tips on that. CWD testing, anything you want to say? I mean, we have test kits, right?
Yep.
One thing we've been offering, it's required in some areas. So again, we have the link in the chat about where you need to go to see where you need to do mandatory testing on opening weekend. But there's also the opportunity to get test kits. It might be too late to get one ordered and to you, but we have them available in many of our area wildlife offices. So if you contact the area DNR wildlife office, you should, in many cases, be able to pick up a sample kit or a test kit to take your own sample and submit that and find out if your deer is indeed positive or clean from CWD. So that's a really great resource. We mentioned avoid cutting the bone for the reasons that we were just talking about. And then I've really found that the fatty tissue, some of this silver skin is called, these shiny joint tissues and things like that, can decrease their taint the flavor. I won't say taint's a bad word, I guess, but make it not taste as good. So when you are butchering, if you're doing your own butchering, take care to cut out so the cleaner pieces and remove some of that. You're going to be much more happy with your venison.
And I use the pork for my sausage, venison sausage making. I'll usually try to make up 20-25 pounds a year of that, and then the rest goes into burger, and I'll add beef to that because it tends to stay in the freezer longer. I think the recommendation on pork is about 6 months, and beef is up to a year. So, and donate your hides for habitat. That's a Minnesota Deer Hunters program. There's orange boxes at a lot of registration stations. And some of you guys know that I do the archery in the schools program. And in some cases, MDHA is using hide money for education, and they're helping schools get their archery equipment with deer hide money. So that's a huge, huge give back.
A couple things to add. Thank you. That's a great tip, and it's a wonderful program to help support habitat in the state. Thank you, MDHA. There's a lot of great processors, butchers in the state. Our local butcher does a wonderful job with sausage. Love it. So like some of the trim and scraps that aren't really best for rounds or steaks or roast or whatever, you can save that, and we get those made into sausage, which is awesome. And then lastly on this tip, I guess the carcass, the best management practice right now, we used to like freely not worry about putting it on our property, dumping it, but because of CWD concerns, because that can stay in the soil after the carcass decomposes, the best management practice right now is to put it into your garbage. You might want to double check with your hauler just to make sure it's legal or how they want it packaged, but in generally, those carcasses then are going to line landfills or incinerators where they're processed and it destroys or encapsulates the potential disease issues. So that if you're wondering about what you do with your carcass, that is kind of the best practices right now. I'm sure you're all hungry right now, seeing that great venison that I made last week. Cassie put the recipe in the chat, so check that out if you want, but it's a great way to have some fresh, nothing better than a meal where you actually grew your potatoes and got your own deer, right?
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry, back to the number one. Go David Ledermann, we got to end with number one, right? Get out there and spend time with your family and friends. And that summarizes my top 10 with Craig's help. Anything else you want to add, Craig?
Nope. And, keep a journal so you can go back and retell those stories. When you get a nice one like these $2 here, consider getting it mounted and hanging on the wall. It just brings back the day, the people you were with, the firearm that you used. I mean, it just tells the whole story just by looking up at that deer, and it really celebrates that deer's, I was gonna say life, but the harvest, and it's a proud moment when you get a big buck like Jeff's got there, like my wife has on the other side.
Yeah, and that's was my dad got that one actually with all of his grandchildren or many of his grandchildren around. So a really cool moment.
Good deal.
Some additional resources. Again, for the recording, folks can be able to look this again. This talk is recorded, so make sure you check that out. If you go to our website, you can actually get linked right to that. Check, search for outdoor skills, and you can link to all of our past webinars. So that's it. I think, Benji, we have some time for questions.
Yeah. If anybody has any questions, please enter those in the Q&A section there. Jeff, you brought up one thing. We were talking about tagging your deer and how we use a lot of that data for deer management. So I wanted to share the link with everybody too. On episode 179, we did on deer management for this year and how people get involved in that, have input in deer management and stuff. We have a lot of public resources and public input we draw from people. So I just put that link in the chat. So check that out.
Thanks, Benji.
Yeah, you guys had some great tips there. We just did episode 2 on preserving your harvest and talking about, different ideas, different ways to preserve your harvest too. And I was sharing with one of our Learn to Hunt students that I have the first doe I ever shot. I have the front hooves of that doe made into a gun rack. I still have it sitting. It's actually out in my shed, but don't have it in the house to show you, but it's kind of cool. And Craig, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. You did send these down to me, but that's a yearling jaw right there. I put a link to a resource in the chat there too, to kind of how to tell what these are. And these are wired together, so they're not super good, but that one there, that bottom one is an adult deer there, so probably not the best camera work, but you can really tell the difference when you look at those. And there's some great ways to be able to count the teeth on those.
The cusps on the teeth.
How many ridges there are.
And so if you get real into this kind of stuff, I mean, we document the age of the deer and estimated weight, and we'll take our jawbone and see if we can get a good estimation on the age. Tells you a little bit about the health of the deer around your area, when you can check out the age. I shot a monster doe a few years back, and that deer had been on the landscape for a long time when we looked at her teeth, and but we put her in the freezer and enjoyed her all winter.
I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A. This is a chance for any of you that are still hanging on and have a specific question you want to ask any of the three of us. We'd be happy to chat about that and answer it, but maybe we covered it all, Craig.
We got a question coming in.
Yeah.
I've never butchered on my own, but want to. Any tips? There's some really good videos out there online. If you get a chance, we use a book called Cut It, Gut It, Cook It for our Learn to Deer Hunt program, and you can open the book, the plastic coated pages, so you can turn the page and not worry about getting the pages bloody. And it'll show you step by step how to cut that deer apart. And Jeff and I have talked about this before, but as you break it down, there it is. As you break that deer down, you're going to see the seams in the muscles, so you know where to cut. And each muscle makes a different kind of steak or a roast. Front shoulders, I usually put into sausage. Hindquarters, I make a couple of roasts, and then the rest goes into ground meat. The back straps on each side of the spine, I cut them into about 6-inch blocks. And then when we take them out of the freezer, my wife can decide if she wants me to cut chops, if she wants butterfly steaks, if she wants cube the meat and make, like tips and gravy. Then there's 2 special little pieces of meat that lay on the inside of the deer. It's called the inside tenderloins. And if you've ever had a good beef steak and that little sliver of meat that lives on the one side of the bone, that's the piece of meat we're talking about. It's tender, it's flavorful, but you only get 2, and they're not very big, so you get 1 meal. So we used to do heart and inside tenderloin for the first meal at deer camp. And now with CWD, we have to put it all in the freezer and wait till the test comes back before we can have it.
Yeah, and it's kind of intimidating, I think, especially if you've never done it before. And you know, outside of some of the tips that we had about try to remove the fat and some of the other joint tissue and stuff, because that can change, you know, not make it more gamey flavored, whatever. There's not really anything you can do wrong. I mean, yeah, I mean, it might not look pretty, it might not be cut, or in the end, you can also just grind it, right? Because there's a lot of, you can make a lot of great stuff with ground venison, especially if you mix it with some like pork or beef. So as much as intimidating is, you just got to get in there and do it. And if you mess something up, it still tastes good.
Yep.
So
I use a
and you can
fillet
cook
knife
it,
a lot.
you know, make it into tacos, whatever.
I use a fillet knife because it's very pliable and I can follow the bone right around. It just seems to work very, very well for us. And it'll take a few hours to process a deer from start to finish.
Yeah, make time.
Yep.
If you can hang it, if you can hang it, that helps. I mean, you certainly can do it on the ground or the table, but another way is to, well, of course, skinning it, which is, there's no videos about that, but once you got the skin off and to quarter it, take off the quarters, that's also makes it more manageable, like if you can't hang it or if you have to work from a table. So that's another tip.
Tricia wants us to know that in addition to keeping warm, that the heater packs I've found rechargeable hand pocket heaters. I don't know if that's the kind that you would boil in water to bring them back, but one of my hunters had those on the last hunt we were on, and it was amazing how fast they generated heat. You don't have to start a fire in the woods if you got one of those.
There's some that you can plug in now that you can plug in and charge, I think, with, you know, that also USB. Apparently can be an emergency cell phone. I did not know that, so thanks for that tip.
Yeah, those are great.
Let's see here. Alex, can you shoot a non-legal buck in areas that where harvest of any sex is allowed? Yes. You can shoot a male or female deer in an either sex deer permit area. Oh, she's talking about the rechargeable ones.
Yeah.
And plug in rechargeable hand warmers and a vest too.
Yeah, lots of technology.
Heated clothing now.
Stuff that we didn't have, you know.
Yeah, right.
I have an old Zippo one that you put Zippo lighter fluid in and use.
Yeah.
Yep, the Jones style.
For years.
Yep.
A really good question on butchering and hanging a deer for best tenderness and how long. Partly that's going to depend on the weather. Unfortunately, the opening part of deer season the last few years, or even during archery season, of course, it's too warm. But if you can get it in a chilled situation, again, I don't know, consult with your local butcher. I'm not sure what the health standards are and the safety issues, but you know, we with the right conditions, you can hang a deer for several days, and that will help with the tenderness.
Yep. I have a heated garage now, so when I bring a deer in, I skin it right away so that I can cool it down as much as possible, and the next day I start processing it out. And if it's really warm, like in bow season, I'd hang them upside down and I'd fill the chest cavity full of bags of ice and make sure that I've got a way for any water to, I've got a floor drain in my garage that I hang my deer over so that the water can go out the drain. But yeah, if it's really warm, you got to get on it right away or you could lose that deer.
Yeah, again, and just hanging it because it will cool quicker that way than sitting on the ground or whatever. So, or the warm garage floor. So, ice is a really good suggestion.
Yeah, make sure to use ice and not let it sit in the water. So, like Craig said, make sure that you have a way to drain that out. Or I use, you know, we got our deer that we're eating here for the governor's opener. I used like frozen milk jugs. You just put it in there so the water's not as much of an issue. So, one other tip I got for us public land hunters, one of our mentors, Taylor, showed me these. They're paper clips with just reflective flagging on them. So going in and out of the stand at night, go out there and we scout a day or 2 days before. You can hang a couple of these paper clips on trees so you can help find your stand in the morning, and they're easy to just clip back off and put on your vest or something. That's a really nice way to be able to see coming in there where you're going in the trail, and be able to just take them with you when you leave and not leave stuff out there. So
those would be really helpful for tracking too, if you're trying to find a deer that you haven't located with their blood, with the blood trail. So that would be really good to use them for that too.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. So
used the flagging tape, and you can mark where that deer is going and find the last spot of blood and whatnot. But the problem is you got to go take it down. You can't just leave all that flagging tape hanging around the woods. So that's a really nice way to take them down easily.
We got just a couple of minutes left here, and I see Alex put a question there for you, Craig. When deer hunting with a shotgun, is it absolutely critical to put a sight on your gun?
Well, Jeff is our resident shotgun hunter.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And I don't know if you meant, there's different kinds of sights you can have. Your gun typically will come with a BB on the end of the shotgun, so which is great for shooting shot, but it will work for shooting a slug too. Practice is key. You don't have to have a fancy sight. You don't have to have optics to be able to shoot out of a shotgun with a slug. Obviously range, the better your sight system, the range is going to be longer, probably that you're more accurate. So figure out what you're comfortable with, but absolutely, you do not have to have a fancy sight on your gun.
And hunt within your range. I mean, if you're good 25 yards, if that deer comes out at 50 yards, you might have to wait until it comes closer, or practice enough so that you can shoot further, or maybe improve your equipment in the coming years, adding a scope or a better sight system or whatever. It's all about making sure that you make a good quality shot on that deer. We don't want to lose them. It happens, but we don't plan on losing them. For me, a shotgun was always just for shooting birds until I met Jeff, and he explained that, you can shoot deer with them too.
Yeah, and quite a few of them.
Yeah.
All right.
And I've been a
great
rifle hunter
job
for a long time, so thanks, guys. This was fun.
Yeah,
it was.
Thank you for all the tips. People are starting to get excited. I guess the weather's getting colder, so now I'm kind of getting excited about deer season. Again, just got a little snow moving in, so hopefully they'll get up and move a little bit more. So I want to remind everybody, next week we're talking about red horse. We don't quite want to get rid of fishing season yet, so episode 188 is going to be on red horse in Minnesota, a rough fish that is important to our ecosystem and a great fish to go and chase after in the spring and the fall season. So that'll be a fun one. So thanks everybody for joining us. Have a safe and fun weekend outside. Hopefully everybody gets some tips and tricks. Gets a little excited for some deer hunting this year. So we'll see you out in the woods.
Quick.
Stay safe. Thanks everybody.